The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's ER flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across Yoon Tae-seok's face as he ended the call about his wounded lieutenant. He was turning toward the exit when a sound stopped him cold, a soft, exhausted voice humming a melody he'd forbidden himself to remember. In his world, ghosts didn't exist. But that voice did. He shouldn't have looked. Every survival instinct he'd honed over a decade told him to keep walking, to leave the maternity ward behind him. But his feet betrayed him, carrying him to the doorway of room 304. Through the gap in the door, he saw her. Talia Brooks, her hair wrapped in a faded scarf, dark circles carving shadows beneath her eyes. She looked nothing like the bright-eyed woman who used to trip over his Persian rugs while apologizing profusely. She looked wrecked. Survived, not living. And then he saw the bundle in her arms. Pink blanket. Tiny fist curled against her chest. The profile of a face that made his blood run cold, that jawline, those eyes, even closed in sleep. The timeline slammed into him like a bullet. 8 months. It had been 8 months since he'd screamed at her about broken vases and incompetence, since he'd thrown cash at her feet and watched her stumble out of his mansion with tears streaming down her face. 8 months of her vanishing completely. 8 months of him destroying anyone who dared mention her name, of staring at the black envelope from Chairman Choi until the paper wore thin. And now this. The baby, his baby, shifted in her arms, and Talia's eyes lifted to the doorway. She froze. So did he. For one suspended moment, the ruthless head of the Geum-River Syndicate, the man who'd built an empire on fear and precision, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the family he'd abandoned to save. 1 year earlier. The mansion loomed against the Seoul skyline like something out of a nightmare, all sharp angles and black glass, designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Talia Brooks stood at the service entrance with her second-hand messenger bag clutched against her hip, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. She needed this job. Desperately. Her student loans were crushing her, and her previous employer had let her go after she'd accidentally knocked over an entire display of imported wines. The agency had been clear, this was her last chance. One mistake, and she'd be blacklisted. You're the new girl. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chai, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. American? Yes, ma'am. Talia Brooks. I'm studying at Seoul National An. I didn't ask for your life story. You'll clean the West Wing offices. Mr. Yoon works late. Stay invisible, stay silent, and for the love of God, don't break anything. Mrs. Chai's expression softened slightly. He's not cruel, but he values his privacy. Understand? Talia nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. The rumors about Yoon Tae-seok ranged from business mogul to something far darker, whispered in the corners of the agency office when they thought she wasn't listening. The West Wing was exactly as she'd imagined, sterile, expensive, empty. She worked quickly, dust cloth in one hand, furniture polish in the other. Every surface gleamed like it had never been touched. She was polishing the massive desk in the corner office when she heard the door open behind her. She spun too quickly. Her elbow caught the edge of the coffee tray Mrs. Chai had left for Mr. Yoon's evening refreshment. Time slowed as the porcelain cup tipped, dark liquid arcing through the air. Talia lunged for it, her foot tangling in the vacuum cord. She never hit the ground. Strong hands caught her waist, steadying her with surprising gentleness. The coffee cup, somehow, ended up in his other hand, not a drop spilled. She looked up, heart hammering, and found herself staring into the darkest eyes she'd ever seen. Yoon Tae-seok was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't set in such severe lines. His black suit was perfectly tailored, and she could see the edge of a tattoo peeking above his collar. He wasn't smiling. I'm so sorry, Mr. Yoon, I didn't hear you come in, I swear I'll be more careful. Breathe. His voice was low, quiet. He set the coffee cup down on the desk and released her, stepping back. You're the new hire. Yes. Talia. Talia Brooks. She was babbling. I promise I'm not usually this clumsy, The cord was in your path. Mrs. Chai should have secured it. He picked up the coffee, took a sip, and studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're American. Yes, sir. Your Korean is good. Thank you, sir. A long silence stretched between them. Talia had the strangest feeling she was being evaluated for something far more significant than her ability to dust furniture. Finally, he nodded once. Finish your work. And next time, his gaze dropped briefly to where his hands had been on her waist, then snapped away. Watch your footing. He disappeared into the adjoining room, leaving Talia standing alone, her heart still racing, wondering why a man with a reputation for ruthlessness had just saved her coffee, and her job. 3 weeks later, Talia had almost convinced herself she'd imagined the warmth in Yoon Tae-seok's hands when he'd caught her. He was polite, distant, barely acknowledging her presence as she cleaned around him during his late-night work sessions. Sometimes she'd glance up from dusting to find him staring at her, but he'd always look away before she could be certain. The Ming Dynasty vase sat on a pedestal near the window, pale blue porcelain decorated with dragons, probably worth more than her entire education. Mrs. Chai had warned her about it specifically. Don't even breathe near that thing. It's been in Mr. Yoon's family for generations. Talia gave it a wide berth every night. Until the night the window latch broke. She was reaching up to close it against the sudden rainstorm when the frame gave way. The window slammed inward, catching her shoulder, sending her stumbling backward directly into the pedestal. The sound of shattering porcelain seemed to echo forever. Talia stood frozen in the middle of the destruction, blue fragments scattered across the dark wood floor like pieces of sky. Her hand was bleeding where she tried to catch it. This was it. She was done. What happened? Tae-seok appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked. The window, I didn't mean to, I'll pay for it, I'll work for free, He crossed the room in 3 strides, but instead of looking at the shattered vase, he caught her wrist, turning her hand toward the light. Blood welled from a cut across her palm. You're hurt. The vase is trash. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it against her palm, his touch gentle despite the firmness of his grip. Porcelain can be replaced. But Mrs. Chai said it was in your family. My father's family. Something dark flickered across his face. I never liked it anyway. Too fragile. His thumb brushed against her wrist, and she realized he was checking her pulse. Your hand is shaking. I thought you'd fire me. For an accident? He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd started working there, she saw something human beneath the severe exterior. You thought I'd throw you out over a vase. It wasn't a question. Talia nodded anyway. Sit. He guided her to the leather chair behind his desk, then disappeared into the adjacent bathroom. She heard water running, cabinets opening. When he returned, he had a first aid kit. He cleaned the cut with careful precision, his dark head bent over her hand. The silence felt different now, charged, intimate. Rain drummed against the window she'd failed to close. Why do you work so late? The question escaped before she could stop it. It's past midnight. Habit. He applied antibiotic ointment with steady fingers. When you grow up in a house where silence means survival, you learn to prefer empty rooms. The vulnerability in those words struck her like lightning. This wasn't the cold crime lord from the rumors. This was someone who understood being alone. I grew up in a house full of noise, she offered quietly. 6 siblings. I used to hide in the bathroom just to think. When I came to Seoul, the quiet felt like drowning. His hands stilled. He looked up at her, something unguarded in his expression. And now? Now I clean a mansion at midnight and talk to a man who saves coffee cups and calls priceless vases trash. She smiled despite herself. It's the best job I've ever had. For the first time since she'd met him, Yoon Tae-seok almost smiled back. It happened on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks after the vase incident. Talia was in the kitchen making tea, a habit she developed during the late hours when Tae-seok worked, and she pretended to busy herself with tasks that didn't need doing. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, and something about the gesture, the weariness in his shoulders, made her pour a second cup without asking. Rough day? She set the tea in front of him. A business partner decided to test my patience. He wrapped his hands around the cup but didn't drink. I'm told I lack diplomacy. You do. The words escaped before she could stop them. When his eyebrows rose, she rushed on. I mean, you're direct. It's not a bad thing. Just, intense. Intense. He tested the word like it was foreign. Is that what I am? Among other things. She was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how the kitchen suddenly felt smaller than it had moments ago. What other things? His voice dropped lower, and when she met his eyes, they weren't cold anymore. They were burning. Tae-seok, the use of his given name, without the formal Mr., hung between them like a confession. He set down the tea and closed the distance. His hand came up to cup her face with that same surprising gentleness he'd shown from the beginning. Tell me to stop. She couldn't. She'd been falling for weeks, every late-night conversation, every almost smile, every moment he'd chosen her safety over his precious things. When he kissed her, it felt like coming up for air after drowning. After that night, everything changed. The mansion that had felt like a mausoleum became their secret world. Tae-seok started coming home earlier, 6 o'clock instead of midnight, then 5, then sometimes in the afternoon, claiming he had paperwork that could be done remotely. Mrs. Chai gave Talia knowing looks but said nothing. They were careful. No public affection. No traces left behind. But in the privacy of his study, Talia would sit on the edge of his desk while he worked, reading her textbooks aloud just to fill the silence he'd once preferred. He'd pull her into his lap between conference calls, bury his face in her neck, and breathe like she was oxygen. I used to think this house was a fortress, he told her one evening as they stood by the window, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. The city lights sprawled below them. Something to keep the world out. And now? Now I think maybe it could be a home. His voice was rough with something that sounded like hope. Maybe I don't have to choose between this life and a real one. Talia laced her fingers through his. She'd seen glimpses of his other life, the men in black suits who visited late at night, the phone calls he took in terse Korean, the way his expression would go cold and lethal when business called. But here, with her, he was just Tae-seok. A man who liked his tea too sweet and who had started keeping books she recommended on his nightstand. You don't have to choose, she whispered. She believed it. They both did. For 3 perfect months, they believed they could have everything, his empire, her presence, a future that included both. They were wrong. The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered with his usual correspondence. Black paper, no return address, sealed with red wax stamped with a crane, Chairman Choi's signature. Tae-seok opened it in his office, alone. The photographs spilled across his desk like poison. Talia laughing in the garden, sunlight catching her hair. Talia at the market near campus, carrying groceries. Talia entering his mansion through the service entrance. Close-ups, taken with a telephoto lens. Dozens of them, documenting her movements over weeks. The note was brief: "Beautiful things break so easily. It would be unfortunate if something happened to your pretty maid. Perhaps we should discuss your recent territory decisions." The paper crumpled in his fist. Chairman Choi. The old snake had been circling for months, angry that Tae-seok had refused to partner on a human trafficking route through Busan. This was retaliation. This was a message written in the language Tae-seok understood best: threaten what matters, gain leverage, win. He'd made a mistake. A fatal one. He'd let himself believe he could have something soft in a world built on violence. He'd let himself love someone, and now Choi knew exactly where to cut to make him bleed. His phone buzzed. A text from Talia: "Staying late at the library tonight. Don't wait up, red heart." The heart emoji felt like a knife. She had no idea that right now, someone was watching her, documenting her, planning how to use her against him. She studied at the library, walked home alone, lived in a tiny apartment with locks a child could break. She was vulnerable. Exposed. Because of him. Tae-seok pulled up the security footage from his external cameras, rewinding to the past week. There, a black sedan parked across the street on 3 separate occasions when Talia arrived for work. There, a man in a gray jacket photographing the gate. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. Choi wanted him to know. Wanted him to understand that Talia's safety hung by a thread that could be cut at any moment. He had 2 choices. He could go to war, surround Talia with protection, turn her life into a gilded cage of bodyguards and armored cars. Let her know about his real world, the blood, the bodies, the empire built on fear. Watch the light in her eyes die when she understood exactly what kind of monster she'd been sleeping with. Or he could cut her loose. Push her away so completely that Choi would see she meant nothing. That she was just a servant, easily discarded, not worth using as leverage. Both options felt like dying. But one of them kept her alive. Tae-seok stood at his window as the sun set over Seoul, the crumpled photographs in one hand, his phone in the other. He thought about her smile. Her terrible jokes while dusting. The way she'd curled into him last night and whispered that she was falling in love with him. He thought about her blood on Choi's hands because Tae-seok had been selfish enough to believe he deserved happiness. His reflection in the glass looked like his father, cold, hard, alone. He made the call to his head of security. "I need you to stage something tomorrow. Make it loud, make it public, make it believable." "What are we staging, sir?" Tae-seok closed his eyes. "A firing. And make sure Chairman Choi's people are watching." The photographs went into his desk drawer, behind the false bottom where he kept his father's gun. He couldn't bring himself to destroy them. They'd be all he had left of her after tomorrow. All he'd allow himself to keep. Talia knew something was wrong the moment she arrived Friday morning. Mrs. Chai wouldn't meet her eyes, and 2 of Tae-seok's security team were stationed in the foyer, unusual for daytime hours. The mansion felt different, charged with a tension that made her skin prickle. "Mr. Yoon wants to see you in his office," Mrs. Chai said quietly. Immediately. Talia's heart jumped. Maybe he had good news. Maybe he'd decided they didn't need to hide anymore. She'd been working up the courage to tell him her own news. She'd taken the test yesterday, staring at the positive result in her tiny bathroom, terrified and exhilarated all at once. 2 weeks late. 2 pink lines. A future she hadn't planned but suddenly wanted desperately. She smoothed her uniform and knocked on his office door. "Enter." His voice was ice. When she stepped inside, Tae-seok stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back, his expression the same cold mask he'd worn the first day they'd met. No, worse than that. This was the face from the rumors, the crime lord who made men disappear. Mr. Yoon? She tried to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Chai said you wanted to. How long did you think you could steal from me? The words hit like a slap. What? Don't play innocent. He moved around the desk, and she instinctively stepped back. I had my accountant review the household expenses. Small amounts, clever, I'll give you credit for that. Skimming just enough that it might go unnoticed. I would never steal from you. Wouldn't you? His laugh was cruel, unfamiliar. A struggling student with loan debt? You think I don't know how desperate you are? I gave you access to this house, trusted you, and this is how you repay me? Tears burned her eyes. Tae-seok, please, whatever you think I did. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't use my name like you have the right. You're a servant. That's all you've ever been. The room tilted. This couldn't be happening. Last night he'd held her, kissed her temple, told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. I don't understand, she whispered. Last night you said. Last night I was drunk and you were convenient. He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer and threw it at her feet. Cash spilled across the floor. Here's your severance. More than you deserve, frankly. Consider yourself lucky I'm not pressing charges. You can't mean this. Her voice broke. Please. Whatever I did, whatever you think. You're clumsy. You're incompetent. You break everything you touch. Each word was precisely aimed to destroy. Did you really think I cared about you? You were a distraction. Nothing more. Liar. She was crying now, ugly desperate sobs. You're lying. I know you. You know nothing. He turned his back to her, staring out the window. Get out of my house. If you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'll have security remove you. Tae-seok. Mr. Yoon, he corrected, his tone deadly. And I believe I made myself clear. You're fired, Miss Brooks. Don't come back. She stood there, trembling, waiting for him to turn around, to break, to show her any sign that this was a nightmare and not reality. But his shoulders remained rigid, his reflection in the window harder than stone. Talia bent and gathered the cash with shaking hands, her vision blurred with tears. She walked to the door, then paused, one hand on the frame. I loved you, she said quietly. He didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't even flinch. She left, stumbling down the hallway past Mrs. Che's pitying gaze, past the security guards, out into the morning air that felt too bright, too normal for the way her world had just shattered. 2 weeks pregnant. Homeless by noon. Heartbroken beyond repair. And Yoon Tae-seok stood at his window, watching her disappear through the gate, his reflection showing nothing but the monster he'd needed to become. The first month, Talia convinced herself he'd call. Apologize. Explain. She kept her phone charged, checked it obsessively between job interviews that went nowhere. We're looking for someone with more reliable references, they'd say, and she'd wonder if Tae-seok had poisoned even that well. The agency blacklisted her. Word spread fast in Seoul's domestic work circles, the American girl who'd been fired from the Yoon mansion for theft. It didn't matter that no charges were filed. The accusation was enough. By month 2, her savings were gone. She'd moved to a cheaper apartment in Itaewon, a basement room with mold on the walls and a door that didn't lock properly. The morning sickness hit her like punishment, and she'd curl on the bathroom floor, crying until she had nothing left. She took whatever work she could find. Washing dishes at a restaurant that paid under the table. cleaning offices at dawn before the workers arrived. Her body changed, swelling despite the nausea, and she bought loose clothing from second-hand shops to hide what was becoming impossible to ignore. Month 3, she stopped checking her phone. Month 4, she stopped crying. By month 5, her pregnancy was visible enough that the restaurant let her go. "We need someone who can work faster," the manager said, not meeting her eyes. She delivered food on a bicycle until the day she nearly fainted from exhaustion, and a kind stranger caught her before she fell into traffic. She should have gone to a clinic. Should have scheduled proper prenatal care. But appointments cost money, and every one she saved went toward preparing for a baby she'd be raising alone. She bought second-hand onesies and a used bassinet. She read parenting books in the library because she couldn't afford to buy them. Month 6 brought the questions she'd been avoiding. Had any of it been real? The late-night conversations, the gentleness in his touch, the way he'd looked at her like she hung the moon, had it all been manipulation? Had she been nothing but a convenient distraction to a bored crime lord? She wanted to hate him. Some days, she managed it. Most days, she just felt hollow. Month 7, the contractions started early. False labor, the emergency room doctor said, sending her home with instructions to rest. Rest. As if she had anywhere comfortable enough to call rest. Month 8 arrived with the first snow and real labor pains at 3 in the morning. She called a taxi, her hands shaking as another contraction ripped through her. The driver took one look at her and drove faster than legal. St. Jude's Hospital emergency room was bright and sterile and full of strangers. She labored alone, gripping the bed rails, biting back screams because she'd learned over these 8 months that no one was coming to save her. No partner to hold her hand. No family to call. Just Talia and the baby and the brutal reality that this was her life now. 12 hours later, they placed her son in her arms. He was tiny, perfect, with dark hair and features that would break her heart every time she looked at him because he had his father's eyes. "What's his name?" the nurse asked gently. "Leo." It meant lion. Brave. Everything she needed to be now. The nurse left, and Talia held Leo close, tears sliding silently down her face. Not from joy, though she felt that too. But from the crushing weight of knowing she'd do this alone. That Tae-seok would never know his son. That she'd loved a man who'd called her nothing, and now she held the evidence that she'd been exactly that. The door was slightly ajar. She didn't see the shadow that fell across the hallway. Didn't see the man with dragon tattoos peeking from his collar freeze at the sight of her. She just held her baby and tried to figure out how to survive tomorrow. The door opened wider. Talia's head snapped up, expecting a nurse, and instead found Yoon Tae-seok standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. He looked exactly the same, sharp suit, severe features, tattoos dark against his collar, and completely different. There were shadows under his eyes she'd never seen before. His hair was longer. He looked like he'd aged years in 8 months. "Get out." Her voice was raw from screaming through labor, but she forced steel into it. She pulled Leo closer, turning her body to shield him. "You don't get to be here. Talia." I said get out. Rage flooded through her, hot and vicious. "You fired me. You called me a thief. You threw money at me like I was trash. You don't get to walk in here now, Anne." I saw him. Tae-seok stepped fully into the room, and she saw his hands were shaking. Through the door. I saw the baby. So what? She was trembling, adrenaline and fury and exhaustion warring in her bloodstream. "You came to make sure I wasn't stealing hospital blankets? To accuse me of something else I didn't do?" He moved closer, and she clutched Leo tighter. The baby stirred, making a small sound, and Tae-seok froze like he'd been shot. "Don't." Talia's voice broke. Don't you dare come near him. How old is he? His voice was hoarse. None of your business. Talia. How old? Hours, she spat. He's hours old, and I've been doing this alone for 8 months, so if you're here to... 8 months. He said it like a death sentence. His eyes found hers, and she saw something in them she'd never seen before, raw, desperate panic. You were pregnant. When I fired you, you were already. 2 weeks. The words came out bitter. I was going to tell you that morning. Had the test in my bag. Was terrified and excited and stupidly, pathetically in love with you. She laughed, harsh and broken. Good timing, wasn't it? Tae-seok's face had gone white. He took another step forward, and this time when she tried to turn away, he caught sight of Leo's face. The baby's eyes opened briefly, dark, almond-shaped, unmistakable. He has my eyes. It wasn't a question. His voice cracked on the words. Your eyes. Your nose. Your impossible to forget face. Talia's tears came hot and angry. So yeah, congratulations. You have a son. A son who will grow up knowing his father threw his mother out like garbage because she broke some vases and wasn't good enough to. Stop. Tae-seok's command cut through her tirade. He was staring at Leo with an expression she couldn't parse, devastation and wonder and something that looked like grief. He's mine. Talia, he's mine. And what are you going to do about it? She held Leo against her chest, protective and fierce. Fire me again? Because I'm pretty sure that already happened. I never. He ran a hand through his hair, and she realized he was barely holding himself together. You don't understand. That day, I didn't. Didn't what? Didn't mean it? Didn't think about what would happen to me. Her voice rose. I lived in a basement. I worked 3 jobs while pregnant. I gave birth in an emergency room because I couldn't afford a proper hospital. So whatever excuse you're about to give me, save it. May I? His hand reached out, hovering between them. May I hold him? Please. The please broke something in her. In all the time she'd known him, she'd never heard Yoon Tae-seok beg. Why are you even here? She whispered. I was checking on one of my men. Stabbing. He couldn't look away from Leo. I heard your voice. I thought I was imagining it. And then I saw you, and I saw him, and, his voice dropped to something raw and honest. I realized I didn't just fire my maid 8 months ago. I abandoned the mother of my child. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Leo's soft breathing. His name is Leo, Talia said finally, her voice hollow. And no. You can't hold him. Tae-seok's hand fell to his side, but he didn't leave. He just stood there, staring at the son he'd never known he had, looking like a man who'd just discovered he destroyed his entire world. The gunshot echoed from somewhere in the hospital, distant but unmistakable. Tae-seok's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The grief-stricken man vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. Get down. He was already moving, pulling his phone from his pocket while simultaneously scanning the room. Now, Talia. What's happening? Down. The command was absolute. He grabbed the privacy curtain and yanked it closed around her bed just as the hospital's PA system crackled to life. Code Silver. Code Silver. All personnel initiate lockdown procedures. Talia's blood ran cold. She'd learned enough Korean to know that code. Active shooter. She curled around Leo, who'd started crying at the sudden commotion. Tae-seok was on his phone, speaking rapid-fire Korean. How many? Where's Jin-ho? Get every available man to St. Jude's maternity ward. 4th floor, room 304. I don't care if you have to shoot through the lobby, get here. He ended the call and moved to the door. What are you doing? Fear made Talia's voice sharp. They tracked me here. He shoved the rolling medical cart against the door, then added a chair for good measure. Chairman Choi's men. They've been waiting for an opportunity like this, public space, limited exits. His hand went to the small of his back, and when it came away, he was holding a gun. Talia's breath caught. She'd known, abstractly, what he was. But seeing him like this, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency, his expression devoid of anything soft, was different. This was the monster from the rumors. The man who made people disappear. You brought them here. Her voice was barely a whisper. To my son. Something flickered across his face, pain, guilt, but he didn't look away from the door. They would have found you eventually. Found him. That's why I pushed you away 8 months ago. They were watching you, Talia. Photos, surveillance, threats. I thought if I made you hate me, if I made it clear you meant nothing. You lied. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. The firing. The accusations. You were protecting me. A lot of good it did. His jaw clenched. Now they know about Leo. One look at him and anyone will know he's a Yoon. I've put a target on both of you. Footsteps pounded in the hallway outside. Shouting in Korean. Tae-seok positioned himself between the door and her bed, gun raised. If anyone comes through that door who isn't mine, take Leo into the bathroom and lock it. There's a window. It's small, but you could fit. I'm not leaving you. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were blazing. You will do exactly what I tell you to protect our son. Do you understand me? Our son. The words hung between them like a promise and a threat. The door handle rattled. Tae-seok's finger moved to the trigger, his body coiled and ready. Talia held Leo closer, trying to muffle his cries against her shoulder. Tae-seok nim. A voice called from outside in Korean. It's Min-jae. 3 hostiles in the stairwell. Jin-ho's team is engaging. Secure this floor, Tae-seok ordered, not lowering his weapon. No one approaches this room without my direct authorization. Yes, sir. More footsteps, running. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed again, closer this time. Talia flinched, and Tae-seok's free hand moved toward her, instinctive, protective, before dropping back to his side. The man you fired, she said quietly, watching him scan every shadow, every corner, every possible threat with lethal precision. He wouldn't have hesitated to touch me just now. The man I was 8 months ago was a coward who thought he could keep you safe by breaking your heart. His voice was raw. The man I am now knows I should have fought for you from the beginning. Another gunshot. Screaming. The distinctive thud of a body hitting the floor. And Yoon Tae-seok stood between his family and the violence of his world, finally ready to let them see exactly what kind of monster he could be, and exactly who that monster would kill to protect. The silence, when it came, was almost worse than the gunfire. Tae-seok stood frozen at the door, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his head of security's report. His shoulders gradually lowered, the gun dropping to his side. Confirmed? All 3? A pause. And Choi? Another pause, longer. Good. Clean it up. I want every trace gone within the hour. He ended the call and finally turned back to face her. The lethal mask was cracking, exhaustion bleeding through the edges. It's over, he said quietly. Chairman Choi won't be a problem anymore. Talia didn't ask what that meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Leo had stopped crying, nestled against her chest, his tiny hand fisted in her hospital gown. She watched Tae-seok set the gun on the windowsill, watched him drag both hands through his hair, watched him finally, break. He dropped to his knees beside her bed. "I kept them," he said, his voice rough. "The photographs Choi sent me. Evidence that he was watching you. Dozens of them, you at the market, at the library, coming to work. I kept them in my desk because they were all I had left of you after I pushed you away." Talia's breath caught. "I screamed at you. Called you incompetent, a thief, nothing." Each word seemed to cost him. "I made you believe I never cared, that you were just convenient. I threw money at your feet and watched you leave in tears because I thought," his voice cracked. "I thought if I made you hate me enough, you'd be safe. That Choi would see you meant nothing and leave you alone. You could have told me." Tears slid down her cheeks. "You could have explained." "I was terrified." He looked up at her, and his eyes were devastated. "Terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd choose to stay anyway. And then they'd kill you to hurt me. I'd rather have you alive and hating me than dead because I was selfish enough to keep you. I lived in a basement," she whispered. "I was so alone. I know. God, Talia, I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for that if you'll let me." His gaze shifted to Leo, and something tender broke through the pain. "Please. Please let me hold my son." The please undid her. She'd been holding on to her anger like armor, but seeing him on his knees, broken open and begging, she couldn't maintain it. Whatever he'd done, however he'd hurt her, he'd done it believing he was saving her life. Slowly, carefully, she leaned forward and placed Leo in his father's arms. Tae-seok's hands shook as he gathered the baby close, supporting Leo's head with the same careful precision he'd used to clean her cut a lifetime ago. He stared down at his son like he was holding something sacred, something impossible. "He's perfect," Tae-seok breathed. "Talia, his voice broke completely. A tear slid down his cheek and dropped onto Leo's blanket. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. What happens now?" She barely recognized her own voice. He looked up at her, still cradling Leo against his chest. "Now I stop hiding. Now I claim you both publicly. Leo is my heir, the next head of the Geum-River Syndicate. And you," he shifted, somehow managing to pull a ring box from his pocket with one hand while still holding their son. "You'll be my wife. If you'll have me. If you can forgive me." The ring was simple, elegant. Nothing like the gaudy displays of wealth his world usually demanded. "I bought it the week before I fired you," he admitted. "I was planning to propose, to find a way to keep you safe while keeping you close. Then Choi's envelope arrived, and he shook his head. "I thought I was choosing your life over my happiness. I didn't know I was choosing it over our family." Talia reached out, her fingers trembling as they touched Leo's tiny hand, then Tae-seok's where he held their son. "You hurt me. So badly. I know. I don't trust you yet. I'll earn it back. However long it takes. And if I say yes," she met his eyes. "I won't be hidden. I won't be a secret you keep in the shadows while you play crime lord. Never again." His voice was fierce. "You'll stand beside me. My partner, my equal. The mother of my heir and the woman he swallowed hard. The woman I never stopped loving, even when I was trying to." Leo stirred between them, making a soft sound, and they both looked down at him, this tiny, perfect thing they'd created together. "Ask me properly," Talia said quietly. Tae-seok looked up at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. Still on his knees, still holding their son, he opened the ring box. "Talia Brooks. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you and our son? She thought about the basement apartment. The loneliness. The labor without anyone to hold her hand. She thought about his gentleness that first night when he'd caught her, about the way he'd called a priceless vase trash because he cared more about her safety. She thought about the man who'd broken her heart to save her life, and the man kneeling before her now, finally brave enough to fight for her. Yes, she whispered. But you're buying me a better hospital room. This one has bullet holes in the door. His laugh was broken, relieved, real. He kissed Leo's forehead, then looked up at her with something that might have been joy. Anything you want. Everything you want. For the rest of our lives. 1 year later. The conference room of the Geum-River Syndicate's headquarters had seen its share of blood and intimidation over the decades. Today, it hosted 7 of Seoul's most dangerous men, all sitting ramrod straight in leather chairs, trying very hard not to smile at the sight of their boss attempting to take notes while a 1-year-old systematically destroyed his paperwork. As I was saying, Tae-seok continued, shifting Leo higher on his lap as the toddler grabbed for his pen, the Port Authority is requesting a larger percentage. I'm inclined to refuse. Duh. Leo announced, successfully stealing the pen and immediately trying to eat it. No, that's not food. Tae-seok gently extracted the pen, replacing it with a teething toy shaped like a dragon that Talia had bought as a joke. Min-jae, what are your thoughts on the counteroffer? His second-in-command, a man who'd killed 3 people just last month, was desperately trying to maintain his composure. I think we should, he broke off as Leo threw the dragon at him. Sir, perhaps we could reschedule when the young master is. When he's what? Less present? Tae-seok raised an eyebrow, the gesture still capable of making grown men nervous despite the toddler now yanking on his tie. Leo is the heir to this organization. He'll learn this business from the ground up. Even if currently from the ground up means learning that conference calls are not, in fact, entertaining. The door opened and Talia entered, carrying a tray of coffee. She'd changed from her morning clothes into an elegant black dress, her hair swept up, diamond rings catching the light. She looked every inch the queen she'd become. Gentlemen, she greeted them warmly, setting down the tray. I see my son is taking detailed notes. Very detailed, Tae-seok said dryly as Leo grabbed a fistful of his hair. Though his handwriting needs work. She leaned down to kiss Tae-seok's temple, then extracted their son from his father's lap with practiced ease. You're terrible at this. Holding meetings with a toddler is like conducting business in a hurricane. I'm learning, he protested. You put his diaper on backward this morning. The room went very quiet. Several of the syndicate members suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. That was one time, Tae-seok muttered, but his ears had gone slightly red. And he was moving. He's always moving. He's one. She settled Leo on her hip, and the boy immediately reached for her necklace. Should I take him, or are you planning to present the quarterly reports while he drools on them? Leave him. Tae-seok stood, plucking Leo back from her arms. The boy squealed happily, patting his father's face with sticky hands. I want them to remember that the man they're negotiating with has something worth protecting now. That he's not the same cold bastard who'd burn the city down for profit. Now you'd burn it down for us, Talia said softly, adjusting Leo's shirt. Without hesitation. He looked at his men, his expression hardening into something they recognized, the lethal certainty that had made him feared throughout Seoul's underworld. Which means any threat to my family is a threat to everything I've built. Spread that message to our associates. The Yoon family is not a weakness to exploit. It's a line no one crosses and lives. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. This was the real message, delivered in a conference room while holding his son, but no less deadly for the domestic setting. Understood, sir, Min-jae said quietly. The others nodded. Good. Tae-seok's expression softened as Leo grabbed his nose. Now, about the Port Authority. Duh. 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 Leo chanted, pulling at his father's collar. Talia laughed, the sound bright and free in a room built for darkness. He's saying you're trying too hard. Even babies know when you're being too intense. I'm always intense. Yes, but now you're clumsy about it. She grinned at him. Remember that vase you said was trash? I remember everything, he said quietly, meeting her eyes over their son's head. Every moment. Every mistake. Every second chance you've given me. The syndicate members shifted uncomfortably. This was somehow more intimate than watching their boss change diapers, seeing the way he looked at his wife like she'd personally hung the stars. Meeting adjourned, Tae-seok announced suddenly. Same time next week. Min-jae, handle the Port Authority. If they push back, remind them what happened to Chairman Choi. The men filed out quickly, leaving the family alone in the vast conference room. Tae-seok set Leo down, and the toddler immediately began his unsteady walk toward Talia, arms outstretched. He's getting faster, Tae-seok observed, moving to stand behind his wife, wrapping his arms around her waist as they both watched their son toddle between the expensive leather chairs. Takes after you. Always moving forward, no matter what's in the way. She leaned back against him. Your father would have hated this, you know. The family man act. My father died alone in a house full of people who feared him. Tae-seok pressed a kiss to her shoulder. I'd rather be clumsy with diapers and alive in a house full of love. Leo reached them, grabbing his mother's legs triumphantly. Talia scooped him up, and for a moment, the three of them stood there, the crime lord who'd learned that vulnerability was strength, the woman who'd survived being thrown away, and the baby who'd brought them back together. No more secrets? Talia asked, the same question she asked him sometimes, testing, making sure. No more secrets, Tae-seok promised. Just us. Just this. Just everything I almost lost because I was too afraid to fight for it. Leo laughed, the sound echoing in the syndicate headquarters like a promise of something better, a new dynasty built not on fear, but on the fierce, protective, unshakable foundation of family. Outside the windows, Seoul glittered in the afternoon sun. Inside, Yoon Tae-seok held his world in his arms and finally understood that the strongest fortress wasn't made of walls and weapons. It was made of love, second chances, and a woman brave enough to say yes to a broken man trying to rebuild himself into someone worthy.